Just letting you know this meeting is being recorded by our wonderful host, who's Dana, who's in the background driving the Zoom feature for us this afternoon. We're going to probably take about another 2 minutes to get started, if that's okay, because that beep is disconcerting. It's throwing me off a little bit. Hope everyone's having a lovely day, though. Thanks for coming. In no random order, I'm just going to say hello to everybody. Hi, Caroline. Carly Shears, how you going? Katie Lamb, hello. Ian's iPad, how you going, mate? Tim, good to see you again, mate. There he is. Hi, Ian, how you going? Another couple of minutes, Dana. We'll kick off very soon, probably at 4:35, if that's okay. Liftoff will happen. We got a few numbers coming in today. Oh, that'd be wonderful, Dana. Thank you. I just saw your chat.
No worries.
Matthew, g'day, mate. How you going? Thanks for dropping in. Melissa, hello. Elise, a familiar face. How you going? And I think we can get cracking, I think, Dana, if you don't mind. 4:35 on the spot. The Alive Centre is now on in ready, set, translate mode. And there goes our screen. Good afternoon, everybody. How you going? Philip Orcher. I'm up here on Gadigal land. Before we get started, I just wanted to acknowledge country, and especially the Wurundjeri country that's down there where Barry Street is situated. The Alive National Centre is down there, and I'm a dispersed worker. I think the term is now, Vicky, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm up on Gadigal country, and I'm also a Gumbaynggirr Mudawari man. Sorry, I just got distracted by the chat. Mudawari man living on Gadigal country, but I just wanted to follow protocol and acknowledge country as well. And if we can go to the next slide, please, Dana. I'm sure everybody could see our wonderful screensavers for all the Alive Centre staff members, and it's a wonderful piece of art that we've had commissioned by a friend of mine, Mr. Dennis Golding, and he's aptly named this piece called Healing from the Ground, and it speaks to the connectedness that Aboriginal people have to the land and its healing processes, culturally, spiritually, and emotionally. The symbols of meeting places and waterholes, and the trail lines are also embedded into this piece of art, beautiful piece of artwork that's behind us. And on our wall down in Barry Street, which I got the pleasure to see last week, it's turned out really wonderful. And it's also our ethos on how we are approaching with engaging with Aboriginal communities across the nation to co-design our roadmap. If you can slide to the next slide, please, Dana. But I also wanted to, before we move any further, to give my recognition to the lived experience that's online as well. And I'd like to acknowledge the countries that you are on there and acknowledge your lived experience, both personal and diagnosed, that you've had in the most recent stages of your life. So thank you for being here, and I acknowledge you. I'd love to give you a bit of an update on the Alive Centre. This is our 3 streams, and today we are focusing on stream B, and we have, sorry, just reading some notes, guys, and we've been stream A, sorry, and we are here to speak to Jill, our wonderful guest that's going to be on very soon. Yeah, there we go, stream A. Our research focus of...
I can help you out too, Phil, if you like.
Thank you.
Is that all right? Go back a slide, Dana. We just thought we'd put this up because we often start, we go, Oh, hi, and today is hosted by, and then we realised a lot of the time that we might have been assuming that people might know exactly what that stream is or what the network is that's hosting. So thanks, Phil, for the opportunity just to jump in and share. You know, the National Centre's vision is about vibrant communities, supporting mental health and promoting wellbeing so that we all thrive. And these, as Phil was pointing out, these represent our 3 programs of research, very much focused on prevention across the life course, always being lived experience informed and indeed lived experience led where possible. And I know that's a big focus of what Jill's talking about today, and your work has been very much focused on lived experience and understanding lived experience felt in particular. And in terms of longer and healthier lives in priority populations, as Phil was pointing out, our priority populations are Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and unmet physical health needs with people who live with complex mental health needs as well. So today, Phil and Dana, the next slide just was highlighting that we have a Stream A and mental health care at scale sort of coming together. And in terms of Phil's role, Phil works across the mental health care at scale program in our Stream A work, and indeed across everything, as everyone on the call is. And that national roadmap that we've been talking about and the pocket map that people might have seen is to guide our knowledge transfer strategies and integrated knowledge transfer approaches, and to help support the directions around implementation and translation models. So this is where we're up to in the centre at the moment. Some people may have seen this within our centre update. It is going to our digital platform soon. And really at the moment we're highlighting that we arrived at our pocket map. We've been doing some public co-design, Phil, around the actionable goals and areas that we could focus in on. And again, ensuring that all of that is coming from people with lived experiences, perspectives, and our carer, family, kinship group members where possible. And Phil, I'll throw back to you. You're leading our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander co-design pathways in that.
Thanks very much, Vicky. So I'm looking forward to hitting the ground running across the nation and hopefully bumping into everybody across my path as well. But without much further ado, I'd really love to introduce Jill, who can take the platform away from me this afternoon. but today she will discuss her approach to trauma-informed co-creation, highlighting creative collaborations with the, forgive me with my translation here, Jill, but I recognise one group that you've worked with, which is the Ngungari group, which are the traditional healers of the, now that's a word I can't translate, but they are also part of a women's council, the NPYC Women's Council, as well as a virtual reality in suicide prevention and new work exploring experience of borderline personality diagnoses. Jill is an Australian Research Council Laureate, fellow at the University of New South Wales, where she directs the feltExperience of Empathy Lab and the Big Anxiety Research Centre. She is founding director of the Big Anxiety Festival and leads an engagement program for Alive. Her most recent book is The Big Anxiety, Taking Care of Mental Health in Times of Crisis in 2022. And there's your cue, Jill. Thank you. You can take away the mic from me now and I'll go on.
Thank you, Phil. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Hold on. And just make sure I haven't got rubbish on the screen. Oops. Okay, there we go. Thanks, Phil. And yeah, I'm on Gadigal land as well, just down the road from you. Very good to be here joining you all. And thanks, Vicky, for setting this up. And it's good to see your latest draft there of the roadmap and that emphasis on what would the system feel like, because that really sets up the role of design and creative thinking quite well and resonates with some of our projects, which are all about felt experience and really thinking about lived experience from the ground up. So I'm going to talk a bit about, we can talk a bit about some of the work that we're doing connected with Alive, but I'm going to set this in the context of the Big Anxiety, because this festival is about to be launched in Melbourne next month, and so I hope there are people in the audience from Melbourne who will consider coming along, because we're quite excited about where this is going. And we really see the festival as not just a sort of knowledge exchange platform, but a way of innovating and kind of iteratively testing ideas around how to create supports in communities, leveraging the cultural and creative capacity that we have. And so we started the festival in 2016 in Sydney, and at the time, we were thinking about filling a gap between arts and mental health, but I think that a lot's happened in the sector in the interim, and we've had things like obviously the Royal Commission in Victoria, but the Productivity Commission talking about the need to move beyond narrowly defined clinical services and for community-based approaches to mental health. And so we are really thinking quite systematically about what the cultural and creative and design sectors can do in this area, and how we can build really mature collaboration. So within Alive, I work with a postdoc who's actually in Perth, but linked to me at UNSW, Beck Moran, who's a lived experience engagement fellow. And she has also been part of our recent Big Anxiety in events in Queensland, and will be in Melbourne. So I can talk a bit about what that work involves. So we did two big iterations of the Big Anxiety Festival in Sydney. And then earlier this year, finally, because it was postponed due to COVID, we rolled out our Queensland program, and I see that Ben, who was a fundamental part of that program, is here. And that was really, we had a partnership with Ben in his role at Metro South Health, and came up with this concept of the big reach, which was really extending our kind of agenda for finding ways to connect with people who may not be accessing conventional services, or for whatever reason. And so we do a lot of work actually in thinking about how we can design different, not just pathways to care, but different forms of supports that are embedded in communities, and different modes of connecting. So sometimes we accept that there just aren't the supports available in the immediate environment. So we think in quite radical ways about what those might look like. And so we were in, I'll talk a bit later about the work that we've done in regional Queensland, particularly in Warwick, which was a very deliberate innovation to kind of not just stay in the metropolitan centre. And then moving on to Melbourne, NAM, which, as you see, commences on 21st of September. And we've got a great 2-day forum on 6th and 7th of October, if you want to get a sense of this really experience-led approach that we've been developing. So I just wanted to show you don't have to read all of these, but I just wanted to flash these on screen, because earlier this year we developed these principles for action, And this really came out of discussion with consumers, and Beck Moran, our lived experience engagement fellow, was particularly influential in developing some of these. And we thought it was important because although we'd always had this sort of commitment to a bottom-up approach, we had various partnerships with partners in the mental health and arts sector. But we determined that, one thing I should say, see we had that tagline, people, art, science. That also became for us quite a sort of a methodology as well as just a tagline. Like initially the thought was we're bringing together disciplines, but the more we began to work on projects and programs, the more we realized that it was all about being led by people, and art was kind of a method, if you like. And then it's important to say that we're sort of moving beyond clinical approaches, but of course not in any sort of antagonistic relationship. What we want to do is to sort of develop a really kind of mature relationship where we're doing something in the mental health ecosystem that's not just about responding to a scientific agenda in conventional ways. We really want to figure out what it is that we can do that's perhaps not happening in clinical spaces. So of course we refer to science and clinical practice all the time and are in this dialogue, but it's quite important to develop this new sort of interdisciplinary way of working. So these principles were really about articulating the commitment to a lived experience led agenda, and then this is sort of married with the arts-based method, which is really about investigating the felt experience. And just to give you some examples of what I mean by that, oh God, I've got some weird transition going on there. Sorry. So I wanted to show you this slide, which is our Embody Map program. This is a VR program that is a creative tool for, as it says there, exploring embodied experiences of anxiety and trauma. And it is used as a sorry, I'll just stay on there and go back to that in a minute. So the Embody Map tool was developed as a creative arts tool, but what it enables you to do is to work with an avatar and to paint and depict internal sensations, so felt experiences of trauma and anxiety in the body. And it's been quite effective as an interactive tool because it enables, first of all, visualization of processes, but also a kind of a very immediate interaction where you can change body pose, you can go inside the body, you can make little adjustments in posture, and you can change your relationship to the body. You can also sort of embellish and obviously investigate the kind of things that are going on. And it's a piece that illustrates, so sorry about this, how you can work in a guided way. So we have a kind of a guided meditative program. And it can be self-directed, it can be collaborative, or it can be linked to therapy. So with Metro South Health, we're just developing the clinical uptake of this within trauma programs. So I can talk more about how that works for people who are interested. So just to say that this kind of work is influenced by certain therapeutic practices. So there's a lot that's informed by somatic therapies and sensory motor psychotherapy. But it's not designed to be used within a single specific protocol. Anyway, my PowerPoint obviously wants to whiz onto this. I was going to talk a bit about the genesis of the big anxiety. So this is from our first festival, and was really the emergence of this focus on experience and immersion. So we have from the start done a lot with immersive media, not just because that's an area that I work in my lab, but it came about because immersive media is very experiential. You know, you can just work with and create you know, embodied experience very easily. And one of the things the other thing we were trying to do from the start was to make connection with, you know, different audiences, and to sort of overcome some of the barriers to help seeking, if you like, where, you know, we couldn't rely on people just coming into a building. So I do a lot of work on this aspect of design, where we think about who are the people that come into a building, who are the people that feel comfortable here, and even if we bring them in, how do we stop people being you know, bored, marginalized, feeling bad, wanting to leave? And often, because I work in trauma, and often with a focus on complex trauma in particular, you know, we really need to attend to the way that people experience comfort or discomfort in a given space, as well as these larger questions of what is it that keeps people away from, you know, certain services or institutions. So this idea of having the mobile mood lab there was an initial experiment in how we could get out and sort of connect with people. And this was kind of an immersive thing. It was by an artist who I worked with, George Kut, at that time. And this was just, it was a very simple work that he developed for a children's hospital at Westmead, actually, where it was for children in a pain clinic. And it was really a kind of a relaxation piece, where by lowering your heart rate and working with breath, you control patterns on the screen above. But it was a nice piece because it was a converted ambulance that we bought, and it sort of stuck with the, you know, the bed in the ambulance. But like all of the work we do, it kind of has this self-directed, you know, it's aesthetic and it's kind of fun. It's something you might want to be doing. Absolutely doesn't feel like a mental health intervention. But it's kind of self-directed and quite creative as well. And the other thing that we started doing from the get-go was to develop environments. This was a multisensory environment called Snoosphere that we did in 2017. And there's always a kind of co-design or participatory design approach. So this was made with autistic young people, as they were sort of consultants, but some were sort of co-designers through the whole process as well. And I mention this because we currently in Melbourne have just installed a Sensorium Project, which is a really lovely one. It's a children's sensorium. It's got lots of elements, working with artists that we've worked with over the years, Hiromi Tango, who's in our Brisbane festival, and local artists as well, but also the Nunkari from the Central Desert, who Phil mentioned, who I'll talk about in a while. Now, I want to talk about this project just because it sort of exemplifies our method and is still one of the most, I think, meaningful things that we've been able to support. So this was also in our first festival in 2017 that came out of a long-term community engagement led by one of our postdocs, Lily Hibbert. And what this was a piece with survivors from the Parramatta Girls' Home, which at the time was part of the Royal Commission into, responses to institutionalized abuse. So the women we were working with were testifying at the Royal Commission. So they'd been in the girls' home in Parramatta in their sort of early teens, around about 14. And this was a place where girls were at the time committed by the courts because they were in moral danger, which, could mean they'd been raped or simply neglected, or their parents didn't have capacity to look after them. So they were held there. But of course, what we now know is that they were systematically abused, and there was a systematic rape culture perpetrated through this institution. So those girls are now, this was in, sort of 1970s into the 1980s. And so the women now are in their 60s, but of course, a large proportion of them haven't survived. And those who have all have chronic illness. And the kind of complex mental health conditions that go along with that kind of massive institutional trauma. And so the project was really interesting because it taught us a lot about the way that we now do these large-scale community collaborations around trauma, in terms of not just co-designing an output or agreeing on what needs to be made, but a whole strategy around what do you want to communicate, who's it for, who do we want to reach. And in that, we think about everything, where it should be, the form it should take, what will best convey this, and how do we then design the strategy. So in this case, they wanted to ensure that this abuse and trauma would never happen again. They wanted to communicate to their grandchildren and their generation who they found it difficult to, talk about what happened with. And they also were concerned that they would lose control of their story at the time of the press interest in the Royal Commission, and it might be sensationalized. So what we did was to create an immersive, complete actual scan of the site. And the other thing I should say, the site was under threat of being developed into something like a business park at the time. So there was this idea that it had to be preserved, and it had to be narrated properly by the women. So that is the site. And this is sort of what it looks like. It's an immersive piece that we screened in an immersive cinema, but you can also see it in virtual reality, and you'll be able to see it at our Melbourne Festival or the Forum if you come along to that, where we keep these projects. Actually, one thing I should say about the big anxiety is when you think of an arts festival, usually the emphasis is on new and different, and we've done that theme, so we'll do a completely other theme. What we try to do is this build of knowledge and build of sort of a lived experience community, really. So it's important to learn how we work with complex trauma, or let's say institutional abuse in this case, and then sharing this project with other people of related lived experience is really important to extending the process. And the other thing that happened here was they wanted to broker meetings with like the facts leadership, which we were able to do, things like family and community services, so really specific meetings. So it was an incredibly sort of empowering process. But what it actually did was we scanned the whole environment, and then you move around this environment, and the women recorded narratives. It's called Paragirls Past and Present, which is also quite significant in terms of the way it approaches trauma. So it's not about, you know, the horrors of the past. It's about how those are lived in the present, and what does it mean to live with that trauma and to actually deal with it on a day-to-day basis, and to revisit sites of trauma. So in many ways, I mean, you know, if you haven't heard these stories, it's obviously kind of shocking and moving, but in many ways it's empowering. I mean, these works are always about moving through and using a creative process to process trauma, in effect, like any kind of narrative therapy. But there's also something, I think, about the co-creation, the you know, producing something as well as working through those ideas, and then being able to show it and take pride in that. Anyway, I can talk a bit more about how that process works and what we've learned from it, but I'll show you some of the other projects. This one is one that we developed for the 2019 festival. It's another one I like because it exemplifies how things are seeded and then they grow. So this we toured around Queensland. We've done a lot of evaluation. We had funding from Suicide Prevention Australia to evaluate this, and it's going to be in Warburton for the upcoming festival. So what it is essentially is we could now call it a VR experience for suicide prevention, because in a sense, I mean, there isn't any operational VR in this area that's been tried and tested, but it was created through workshops. That's what you see up there in the top left, with young men. And the premise of this was that young men told us, well, you know, didn't want to sit around talking about feelings, but were potentially interested in working with technology. I mean, it's not kind of young men. It's like we'd all rather be playing with VR and technology than talking about suicidal feelings. But the idea was, could this be a valid way in to actually addressing persistent feelings of suicide? So we worked with a group of young men who had experienced suicidality and repeated suicide attempts. And the goal was to, we didn't actually have a goal. This is what I should say about all these projects, actually. We never go in with a goal or a blueprint. It's, you know, what do you feel? What do you want to make work about? And what do you think it should achieve? And then we try to facilitate something around how we could use different media. So in this case, we spent a long time thinking about the felt experience of suicidality. And this, when we've come to write this up, it seems quite important because it's very unlike the available sort of more CBT focused events, which are about, you know, sort of rational control of irrational emotion, right? Not to say we shouldn't do that, like learning techniques for redirecting feelings and behaviors, you know, that can be very useful. But we were thinking about, let's say we don't want to enter into that, or there's a whole other group of people who aren't doing that. How can we work with the feeling? And this is a good example of how we marry the you know, the science and the kind of people-led arts-based research, because I was at the time working with some clinical neuroscientists in the UK and Sweden who were world leaders in the visual imagery of suicidality. And so we had this idea that we needed to develop an experience or something visual that could powerfully counteract really compelling mental images of suicide, right? And so that was what we worked on a bit in the workshop, and we brought in various understandings of the way that within suicidality and really serious depression, it's hard to have any sort of affect or, emotion, especially positive emotion around memories or future plans. And so the other thing was how can we attach that sort of sensation and feeling to images as well. So anyway, to cut a long story short, what we ended up producing, or this was led by Alex Davies, the amazing mixed reality artist, was this environment that is, as you see there, it's a plain environment with like a table, just a door and a window. And you put on the headset and you see a facsimile of that environment. But then what happens is, as you move around that environment and make changes, so very small actions like opening a door, opening a window, massive changes occur. So really beautiful, like mountain scenes, rainforest, warm breeze. It's just relentlessly gorgeous. So of course, that improves mood. And this is what we did with suicide. The Suicide Prevention Australia grant did the pre-post testing, and everybody's mood improves significantly from whatever baseline, and scores on the hopelessness scale also significantly reduce after 7 minutes. And the key thing there is not just a sort of bliss out experience, but it is because you're doing, it's like a small action, big reward. So I think that actually doing something is important. And the title, Edge of the Present, came from one of the participants in the workshop who said, it's like being at the edge of the present, where you can see that you're at the edge, but there is no future. You can't see it, you can't move into it. So we're doing a lot of work on how can you just make a small step or just wait and something emerges. So we're working with this concept of inventing the future, but only the next 5 minutes. So this came out of this, and we've had a lot of success now evaluating this around the country. So that's another example of the kind of work that we do. I'm really picking some examples here that are quite diverse to show you the different ways that we go out of these collaborative or co-design projects. And so now to Uti Kulinjaku, who are an amazing group of Ngangkari traditional healers from the Central Desert, the APY lands, so across at the intersection of all those states there in the Central Desert. And Uti Kulinjaku is actually an initiative of theirs. It's a group they formed to do kind of mental health literacy work initially, but they are incredibly sophisticated in the way they approach mental health literacy, not just as a kind of cognitive thing, but as a way of understanding experience and emotion. And you obviously will know already that in First Nations cultures, we don't have this kind of almost artificial separation of kind of science and art or medicine and culture. These things are profoundly integrated. So the way that they work with mental health literacy always involves art and ceremony in a really integrated way. But they also, as you see there, that's them at our 2019 conference event. They describe their project as very much addressing the cycles of trauma and trying to break the cycles of trauma. So we were able to do, we continue to work with them, and you'll be able to see them in our forum in Melbourne. And also they have a piece in the RMIT galleries, part of our exhibition there for the festival. But what we did, and again, this VR work will be on show, we created with them a virtual reality piece through doing workshops with them that actually, there we go, oops, sorry, that's it. What you see there is, I'll go back to that if that's got a transition in. So when we went for our initial workshop, we had this idea that we would do something on trauma, but we didn't know what. And they had actually seen our Paragirls work, and they said, we like this technology. We love the idea of doing something in VR that's immersive. And so they're really struck with this idea that you could be, you know, in this sort of very embodied situation. And so then they told us about the story about a man who gets stuck in a log. And the story was of a hunter, goes out hunting, trips over, finds himself stuck in a hollow log, and then can't escape. And so he somehow, I don't know, gets upright and make some little holes in the log so he can see out, and eventually his wives, a community, come to search for him. But it's a long time before he gets released, and he can see them searching for him, but he starts to feel worse and worse because he can't connect with them. And what was interesting when they told us the story is they said, you know, often that's heard, you know, by white fellas as a kind of simple allegory about a hunter. And but the way they told the story, they said this is really about the experience of mental health, suicidality, entrapment, and these experiences of you know, it could be being in jail or removed, you know, forcibly from country, experiencing that separation from country and from family and community. And other people linked it to, you know, substance abuse and really specific experiences. But they told us, they gave beautiful accounts of just that existential condition of like deep depression and just feeling trapped and unable to move. And they spoke about how, you know, you just feel that your body won't move or do anything. You see your loved ones, you see the pain you're causing them, but you can't connect with them, they can't connect with you. And then you internalize all this guilt. And honestly, it's the most, you can't get a better description than the one they gave us of those layers of you know, what that feeling consists of. So then what we did was we were able with my team to sort of honor that story by creating a first-person experience where you're in a log, right? So we scanned the BARC and you're trapped in the log, and then you see through the holes, and what you see is this beautiful expanse of country. So this was just a few hours outside of Uluru, beautiful red desert. And then the women acted out the story as the bereft family looking for him. But the exciting thing about this, so we show it, you know, in our festivals and around the world. But the most exciting thing was it was made for Ananu people in remote communities. So they've had it in 12 remote communities with these headsets, which I love because, you know, that technology is really so portable. And the idea is, as with the Young Men and Suicide Project, you might not be able to have that conversation about what you're feeling inside, but you put on this, you're trapped in a log, and you feel this kind of flood of, you know, sensation and empathy. And then people say, that's it, that's what I feel. So you're kind of right there in the experience. And that's really the point of this, that this is doing the work and catapulting you into that discussion and reconnection. And so that's how it's quite a sophisticated part of their mental health literacy. And yeah, so I just put these are obviously flattened out. It's quite weird to show virtual reality in 2D, you'll realize, because it flattens, but you'll just have to come and see our program in Melbourne to get the experience. Now, couple of other things I wanted to talk about. I've put up a slide there on our 2-day intensive in Brisbane and just some of the responses, which were they were really gratifying, and I put them up not just to kind of glory in it, but I did think that we'd learned something by this point, and what people were telling us about how this worked has really enabled us to understand what works and to take it further. So what we did for the first time in Brisbane was to really try and focus on not just, we show the art and then we have a conference and everyone kind of comes and talks about their work. We tried to do, instead of that, a sort of an experiential event where you're in the experience, things happen, maybe even transformative experiences happen. And so to give you some examples of the kind of thing, now do go online and check our Melbourne program for what we're doing there, but at the top there is a slide from Marianne Wobke's workshop. Marianne is a Girrama woman, Indigenous midwife and artist and long-term trauma worker, sort of frontline worker, but being a midwife, she's focused on working with young women and babies, obviously, because that's where you can break cycles of trauma. But she has developed this wonderful experiential workshop where she actually talks a lot about transgenerational trauma and complex trauma and how to actually address those things that we are often carrying, from birth. Marianne is herself from the stolen generation, so that's very much informing her lived experience and professional approach. And what you see there is she does this beautiful audio visual. I can't even do it justice. You have to come and try it, but suffices to say that you're kind of right in it. You listen to her, but you feel the experience, very embodied, which is not to say, we don't do the discussion around this, but we're very much of the persuasion that you have the experience. We support you to have the experience and then kind of unpack it. So, and that's the other aspect of design that we focus on. If you're going to throw up feelings, good, bad, whatever, we need to create the space to support and enable that process and to hold those feelings appropriately. So we put a lot of work into the design of the event, the flow of the event. So Beck, I think, is online. Beck has done, there's Beck actually at the head of that long table there. Beck does some pieces that are intended to support people. So I think the initial one is called Holding What You're Holding, and is what it sounds like. It's how we come into a space, an event, with whatever it is we're holding and kind of manage that. And Beck has also been overseeing the development of retreat rooms, and then there's lots of ancillary programs like art therapy and things you can do to kind of process, decompress, down-regulate, as well as obviously talk through what's happening. So it's not an even program. It's not like a conference where you just pick out your favorite bits and go to those. It's sort of curated as a supported experience, hopefully. But not many people are doing this. It's a kind of a work in progress, using the arts to the max in this way, but actually thinking about the effect and and designing in the support. So it's very much a work in progress, and we invite input. Beck actually has a survey open that's about looking at or inviting people to tell us when and how they feel safe at an event or unsafe, and then that informs the design of these spaces. And the other piece down there at the bottom image is of the long table. We've been running these long tables on trauma and suicide this year. We've always done the long tables since our first festival, and the format actually came from an artist, a New York-based artist who came to our first festival, Lois Weaver. And the long table is great. It's a completely non-hierarchical discussion, unmoderated. It's set up like a dinner table, and by that we mean that people don't speak to an audience. It's like you speak to each other around the table. So it has that intimacy, even though you have an audience around the edge. And the audience, they're not really the audience. It breaks down because anybody can come up and join the table. So we have about 6 people in the seats to start with, and 12 seats. So there's always half of them empty. People can come up as soon as they want. They can join the table, leave the table at any time. The people who start there aren't a panel of experts. They're simply talking from their experience. And what we found is that through an organic process, you often get a real kind of warmth of support. And importantly, and the person who speaks the most could be someone we didn't know at the start. They were in the audience, they came and joined, and they stayed at the table because it felt right. And what we found is that just that unmoderated, open experience has been important. I can talk a bit more because we did the first one on suicide in Warwick in Queensland, right after the community had lost yet another young man to suicide. 16-year-old Aboriginal man had gone to the hospital in crisis and been turned away and was dead 24 hours later. So there was grief and anger in the community. And so we're already working with this community, and we're about to deliver a series of workshops, but we realized the importance of opening up a space, not controlling the space, very light touch facilitation. It's completely community-led, lived experience-led, and we just put in the supports. And we've been putting in all sorts of the obvious supports, like you might have a trauma counsellor present, but we also have massage, and now we have, the outside rooms. So this idea that you can come and go, and we try to, you can't design everything, but you can design in a way that makes it as easy as possible for people to understand the space as their own and to be able to operate in the space with comfort. So we're going to try to do another one of these integrated into our 2-day forum, which again will be sort of Marianne will be coming to our forum, but there'll be obviously many new artists with lived experience from Victoria. And it is, I think the whole program is led by not just, you say artists with lived experience, but it's always amazing people who sort of do everything, who do trauma support. They work from their experience, and they're really amazing, imaginative practitioners. So it's almost like it's a it's a new form of expertise actually that's emerging in this area. And so just I'll end, and so we can talk, but I just wanted to draw attention to some of the work that we've got in the adjacent show. So the forum's going to be in Story Hall, and that complex, which is actually next to the RMIT gallery. And we've got a nice suite of work in the gallery that we've also tried to approach in this way, thinking about how do we make experience kind of available to people. So this could be, I always think when we design these things, that the people I most want to connect with are people with whom the stories resonate, like they maybe have their own experience of trauma wherever they are with it. Maybe they have no support, and hearing other people's stories is hugely important. So it's for those people, but also for you know, wider community, for clinicians, you know, to just kind of be able to sit with stories. So this is a good one. It's a project that was made with people with a lived experience of a diagnosis of borderline personality disorder. All of the people have had negative experiences of the diagnosis, you know, within the health sector. But they also have stories of trauma through which they make sense of what's happened to themselves. And so what we did in this work, we developed these verbatim scripts with people with lived experience, but then they were reenacted by actors. And what the work consists of, it's like a circle of, it's not flat like that, but life-size characters. So you're drawn into, it's like if you were in some sort of, I don't know, therapy group or, you know, anything, a circle of people where you're having an intimate conversation. And they just give these beautiful accounts. So there's a lot of sort of pieces on self-harm, and but what's lovely is that behaviors that might be pathologized in another context or regarded as problematic are explained, or you know, it just becomes obvious that if you know, in a situation where you have limited opportunities, you know, we do certain things just to, you know, connect with people. And so it's really a beautiful work about how connections are made, and often you know, bad things happen because people are denied the connections that they need. So it's a really beautiful, insightful work about accounting for lived experience that I just think I'd love it if all clinicians working in this area could see this work. So it's not, you know, it doesn't attempt to argue a particular way. It just is what it is, people talking about lived experience. And so I won't spend much, and Beck can perhaps talk about the work that she's got in this context, because one of the things we're looking to do is to just give these kind of stories a home, in the understanding that it's often sometimes difficult for people to listen. You know, sometimes we kind of back away, or, you know, fight, flight, freeze, whatever, avoid, and or just can't sit with and hear things that are discomforting. So rather than having trigger warnings, because as Indigo Dyer says, you know, shouldn't put the trigger warning on the survivor's body, it's really the responsibility is for us to actually think about where we are. So it's an invitation to be with these characters, to hear these stories, but of course to check in with yourself, because we all are not ready for everything at any given moment. So it's about thinking this is there, and there's a way for me to listen and be with it if I'm in that kind of frame of mind at the moment. So just throw that in, because we want to think of another way of getting beyond the trigger warning. I mean, fully informing people, but without sort of creating that horror around experiences. And so these are just some of the other works. There's a virtual reality piece on experiences of the emergency room, again, built around lived experience accounts that were part of a research project. And the other thing, this is for you, Phil, because we were talking about AR, augmented reality. I just wanted to throw this in. It's a bit different, but we made this work in the Yarra Ranges the other week with young people affected by the storms a year ago. And there's really quite a significant trauma that certain young people have experienced. And it's a project that we're doing in all sorts of settings. It's called Hard Place, Good Place. And the idea is, you know, often those places are the same, right? You know, especially if you live in a disaster zone, your good place can become your hard place. And so it was about what it is to live with difficulty and then to try to re-find some sort of good in that. But this, what you see there is AR is really nice because it's a kind of collaborative. You know, you just view it on an iPad or your phone, but and then it superimposes scans on the real environment. So that's a demo. Then what you see there is a fridge that saved someone's life, actually, because a tree fell on the fridge, completely buckled by the tree. And this young woman we spoke to woke up in the morning and there was a tree sort of just hovering above her head. In her bedroom, which was just below this, but she had a very kind of devastating experience that all sorts of came with all sorts of difficulties. But this is a really nice piece, actually, in sort of documenting and, well, I suppose also supporting young people working through that experience. So yeah, that's just a range of the work that you'll see in the upcoming festival. So I hope that gives you a taste. It would be really good if we could open up for discussion, and I'm happy to elaborate more on any of this.
Oh wow, Jill, thank you so much. I think you saw in the chat, I'm not sure if you saw in my chat, I put on an emoji with my brain exploding because I was geeking out a fair bit. and the same sort of sentiment was shared by everybody else who had to leave earlier, who say, yeah, some great, wonderful work, and yeah, it's beautiful what you're doing over there. But before I move any further, everybody, I just wanted to acknowledge that some content may have been triggering this afternoon. So please engage in some self-care for yourself, some self-care strategies, and to help you process what you've experienced this afternoon, or reach out to us at the Alive Centre for a decompressing yarn if you feel like you're up for it. And back to us, Jill. Oh my goodness, I've
Yes.
literally geeked